how is Fully Recovered Life treating you before we get into it?
I didn't know it was possible to be this happy.
Yeah.
I'm going to start crying already. Jesus.
Okay, save it. We'll get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel for another video. I am very excited to bring you today's video. I am very proud to bring you this video because I am very proud of the person who you're going to be meeting today, who I have no doubt is going to inspire this community a lot. But before we can get into that, I have to thank everyone who has already shown their support for the opening of Wanda Nerida, Australia's first and only residential facility here in Australia. Every single dollar that you have donated means the world to me. I know it means the world to Butterfly. If you've signed the petition, you can only sign the petition if you're from Australia. You can donate from anywhere. Please go and donate if you haven't already. We need this facility and the world needs to see that this is possible for it to be possible in other parts of the world. So no matter what you donate, whether you donate $5, $500, $5,000, it means the same to me and it means an awful lot to me. I will be donating $1,000 of my own money across the month because I don't just have that chunk of money sitting around, but it will be making its way onto that donation page throughout the month because that's what I can give and that's what I'm prepared to give. And I want to show that I'm not here to just talk the talk. I'm here to walk the walk, and this is how much I believe in this. So if any of my videos have ever helped you, if a sentence I have ever said has helped you in your recovery, please go over and donate if you can, obviously, only if you can. Now onto the video. It's actually timely that we, segue from talking about why we need to get people more access to eating disorder treatment, given who I'm going to be introducing you to today. And that is a former client, Monica, who I worked with. I think we figured out it was about 18 months to 2 years. And she got in touch with me a few weeks ago or over the last month to tell me two major things about how her life had progressed since we finished up our coaching work. One, she's fully recovered, and two, she's pregnant. And for whatever reason, there might be something in the water. In the same space of time, so the last month, I've heard from 3 other clients who are now fully recovered, and 2 of those other 3, in addition to Monica, are pregnant. So that's 3 former clients, fully recovered and pregnant, which is extraordinary. And part of my job as a coach with current clients is to introduce them to as many examples of full recovery as possible, to show different stories and different iterations of what this process can look like. It is so cool that increasingly I am able to do that for you guys with my own clients. That is the biggest win of all in this work, is getting that update that they're fully recovered and that all the things that we talked about are what they wanted from a recovered life, that's what's happening. So it was absolutely without hesitation that I asked Monica to be on the channel today. And we have a really honest chat about coaching, about her process, about what life is like now that she's recovered. And I hope that it's another example you can come back to of what you're working towards, and that most of us going through this process, we think it's not going to be us. And Monica was a person who thought it wasn't going to be her as well, that was going to be able to reach full recovery. When Monica reached out to me, she expressed that in all her years of receiving treatment, that coaching had the greatest impact on her progress, which I think just goes to show how powerful this new area of treatment is and how needed it is and what a gap it is filling and has the potential to fill. Enjoy the video. Much love to Monica. Super proud of you. So grateful to you for doing this. I can't wait to hear about everything that you do with your incredible, hard fought for, fully recovered life. Don't know if that's actually English, but enjoy the video. So Monica, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today on the channel. I am extremely excited to do this video. And ever since I heard from you a few weeks ago, well, it would have been in the last month, with a big update, 2 huge updates. 1, Monica is fully recovered, and 2, Monica is pregnant with her first baby. And I know that that was something you were that was so firmly in your future plans. So to hear that was just like tears streaming down my face onto the laptop. So you're someone who I think so many people will take inspiration from, that this is possible, right? Full recovery is possible and worth it. Do you want to give people a little bit of background about where you were before you came into coaching, sort of your background with your eating disorder? Treatment experiences would probably be helpful too. What was happening before we came into each other's lives?
So I developed my eating disorder at the age of 16. And I didn't first seek any help until I was out of school. So until I was about the age, maybe 19. And I guess at that phase, I don't want to say that I was forced. I was heavily encouraged by my loved ones to seek this help. And I definitely wasn't in a place where I was wanting that treatment to go anywhere. So it was very on and off for many years. And I was lucky enough and privileged enough to have access to inpatient programs in hospital, as well as outpatient programs, and a number of psychiatrists and psychologists and nutritionists. And before I first met you, I had actually just got out of an inpatient program, and I was doing a day program. And I think that for me, that was such an important step in my recovery, because I was finally in a place where that was all coming from me and I was ready to seek help. And had I not met you, I don't know how far that would have progressed coming out of the hospital environment, because it's very 24/7 support when you're in there, but then when you come out, it's very much back to real life. And I definitely want to acknowledge the fact that I think that all of those professionals play a very important role in people's recovery. And if you're lucky enough to have access to a team like that around you, then that's phenomenal. And like, you should definitely take full advantage of that and use them. However, there are definitely holes in the hospital system. And I guess that's the difference of working with professionals who, unfortunately, a lot of them haven't had lived experiences, whereas a coach like you have, and being able to relate to you, it makes such a big difference. For example, I'll always remember just before I met you, when I did those stints in hospital, I somehow managed to convince 2 psychiatrists and 2 nutritionists that it was an important part of my recovery to know what my weight was. And
that's quite a skill, Monica.
Oh my goodness. Yes, my eating disorder. Many
now
times.
It is all making. Do you remember when I got you off the scales?
Oh my goodness.
Now it is all making sense.
You would never, if I hadn't tried to pull that with you, oh my goodness, you wouldn't have even had 1 bar of it for a second.
That's hysterical.
And I think that's the main difference between having a coach be part of your recovery process. Like, I think it's just that missing piece of the puzzle I just think it's very important when there are, unfortunately, so many holes.
Particularly that transition from inpatient hospital, which, like you said, they all play their part. They all have a role, and we all need different things at different times in recovery. Like, at certain points, coaching is not going to be appropriate for people. I always say, because it's the action stage of recovery, if you're not prepared to take action, it could be very disappointing for you. Just like somebody who is in a recovery phase where they do want to take action, hospital might actually set them back because they're surrounded by people who aren't wanting to take action, who are feeling pre-contemplative, or maybe even a bit, skeptical, or totally just not interested in recovery. So it's going to be different things at different times. Recovery is a mosaic. And I think the thing you touch on, which is so much of the mindset, which is a lot of the people who I see have been in treatment settings where it's not that they're being forced, as you said, but just strongly encouraged, firmly encouraged. And then they come and see someone who is taking more of a position, which is, I can't make you do anything. If you want to do this, here's the framework, but I can't make you do anything. I'm going to work with you to get where you want to go. Right?
Yeah.
So what was some of that stuff that we worked on together that you remember that was that kind of approach of, we're working on these specific things together? What did you want to work on?
To be honest, when I first came to see you, I was actually thinking about it the first time I reached out to you before jumping on with you. And I think that I was probably more unwell than I admitted during the time that I did first start up with you. Mm-hmm. So it's all a bit of a blur because, to be honest, there were so many things that I still had to work on because I was still very, very deep into my eating disorder. But, and it's not funny, but looking back now, there were so many things that you got me to do. And I remember at the time I would go away and the 8 keys of recovery was a big one for you, and rightfully so. But I remember at the time you would get me to do these activities in the workbook, and I was so frustrated by them because, especially the dialogue, where you're creating dialogue between your eating disorder self and your healthy self. And you got me to do that every single day.
Yep.
and email it to you. And I had to email it to you every single day. Yeah. And you did this to me for months, 4 months. And I remember at the time I was just so frustrated. But then it's funny because looking back, I actually, another phenomenal person in the eating disorder space, her name's Sabina, and I'm lucky enough to call her a friend as well. And she reached out to me when she was holding a little peer mentoring workshop, and I was lucky enough to contribute to some of the ideas with the activities, and it was amazing. But anyway, she called me and we were brainstorming, and she's like, what are some activities that you find really helpful? What's something we should maybe go through with these people? The dialogue. It was the first thing that came to my mind because I realized that even now, even though I don't struggle with an eating disorder voice anymore, I still very much have that little critic, and I still struggle with anxiety, and I find myself using that all the time. But yeah, it was things like that. And then another activity that we did that I remember, I actually enjoyed this one, and I enjoyed it at the time as well, and it was a day in the life recovered.
Yes.
And I remember that was always such a big one for me because, that was something that even prior to doing the activity, of course I always dreamt of it. And I would write, and I remember I did that activity a few times, and every time I would write, I would be writing about essentially my life now. And I would be writing about being with my partner and having a kid and being on a holiday and doing everything and just feeling so free. And I remember while I was writing that, I was maybe this is a thing that could happen. I obviously want it, and yeah, I think that those two things were definitely the activities that I loved the most.
Yeah.
Even if not at the time.
Yeah. So how is coaching different to what you experienced in other treatment settings, with psychologists? Because obviously coaching is a new approach, which is more about the doing of the stuff, the practical stuff, the challenging of the foods, and the making food regular and adequate, and that accountability. So what was your experience with that sort of practical aspect of coaching like?
So I guess the difference between coaching and the help that I'd had prior is, again, I know that hospital and those things, they play a part, and it's an important part, but at the same time, with my experience, a lot of it is very much, especially the inpatient program, it's very much about getting you physically in a healthier position. And it's not so much about all the other stuff. And when you reach whatever they consider to be a healthier condition, you leave and that's it. Like, you still have to go home and you still have to face those behaviors by yourself every second, literally every second. Whereas with a coach, I mean, I remember it was something at the start, it was really hard for me to do because I wasn't used to having that 24/7 support. But I remember you said to me, the first time you ever said to me, if you ever get urged to like act on this behavior, ABC, call me. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to call you.
That's
like,
convincing.
I'm not going to, like, no, like, how annoying. I'm like, I'm not going to call you. And I'll always remember, I remember even the road that I was driving down. I was driving down Stirling Highway past the river. And I remember having these urges to go home and act on certain behaviors. And I called you. And I didn't. I went home and I didn't act on any of those. And
I remember that. I was on my way to a first date. and I didn't want to go. So that's how happy I was to talk to you. You were keeping.
You answered, and I was like, what? Like, no, you weren't meant to answer, but you did. Like, even if, and then after that, like, occasionally I would send you a message. Like, I would send you a message over WhatsApp, and even if you didn't reply straight away, you would reply. And again, like, that's something that I never had that. Like, I've had an eating disorder for 10 years, and I think we worked together for a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, there was a gap, and then you came back for a while. Yeah.
And like, during that time, like, yes, it was probably the perfect time for me to start coaching with you, which I think definitely contributed. But during that like year and a half or whatever it was, it just made such a difference. And like, even now, there was a time where I was kind of sharing a bit of my recovery on social media, and I would have people reach out to me, and I never wanted to directly talk to them about their struggles because I didn't think that I was really in a position to do that. Like, I'm not qualified in any means, and the only thing that I would ever do would be give them resources. And the first thing that ever came to my mind was always you. Like, it was always, and if it wasn't, because I know that obviously, unfortunately, there's probably not enough recovery coaches out there. And I know that you always have quite a long waiting list, but even if they weren't even if they couldn't afford or weren't able to have access to you, like, your YouTube channel and like Carolyn Costin's books and pretty much any resource that you ever gave me, I would recommend to them. And like, you know, I just don't feel like, and like, of course I would say to them it's important. And like, you even told me when I was working with you, it is important to have a psychologist or a psychiatrist on board. And again, you have the ability to work with them though. So it's even more beneficial. But yeah, I just couldn't recommend this anymore. Like, it's so underrated. Why did this not exist 10 years ago?
I know. Thank God for Carolyn Costin.
Oh, God. Thank God for you, Mia.
Oh, stop. So now you consider yourself fully recovered, which is amazing, because to get that double barrel of amazing news was incredible. Look at me just getting lower and lower in this seat. Look at how relaxed I am. Like, man, be a bit professional. See, you're not a client anymore, so I can just take my bra off, like not in front of you. This isn't going to
boundaries.
So now that you really resonate with that definition of what it is to be fully recovered, which I'll pop up on the screen for people as a reference. It's a definition that Carolyn came up with, which is so about our relationship with ourselves. There's no mention of like BMIs or weight. So it's so much about healing the relationship with food and body and movement and finding that deeper connection with ourselves. So how did it start to become apparent to you that you could see yourself in that definition?
Yeah, so it actually took quite some time. It's not, because I was very familiar with, in particular, Carolyn Costin's definition of being recovered, fully recovered. I was always very familiar with that. And it was something that I would regularly look at during my recovery at certain points. But it was a very slow discovery to realizing that I was fully recovered, because it's a few people have sort of said to me, like, does like a switch just go off? No, like, no, it doesn't. And I remember it was just a few little things that were happening. So Harry, my amazing partner, would occasionally make a comment about the way that I was just very freely eating, and like not even, because even in the past during recovery, like if I was eating freely, it would always be a thing. Like I would always make a comment about it, or like talk to Harry about my feelings after it. And it was always this really big thing. Whereas all of a sudden it just wasn't. And then as well as that, sorry.
Don't worry, that dog's so gorgeous, you don't have to apologize for it.
That down understands that you don't need a doorbell, and I can't. But, anyway, so along with like the food freedom slowly creeping in, like I started to realize things like exercise. As you know, even when I was quite far along in my recovery, that was something that really kind of was deeply seated in me, was this need to constantly exercise. But all of a sudden that was completely gone. And it sounds so simple, right? Like, can't be bothered going for a walk, don't go for a walk. Like, it's raining, it's cold, don't want to go for a walk, don't go for a walk. It seems so simple, but like obviously when you're in the midst of an eating disorder, it's not that simple. But all of a sudden it was again. Like it was. And like I didn't have to, like at the start maybe I was questioning, like I'd be on a walk and I'd be like, oh, like do I really want to be on this walk? And I was really like hesitant. I was like, I don't know, like, but it just slowly got easier and easier. And then my social life, I slowly started to, and like, don't get me wrong, like I think that's one of the great things about being recovered as well, is my relationship with myself and knowing who I am now, and knowing what I actually like. And during discovering that, I've learned that I definitely am an introvert, 100%. But I also now have the ability to socialize. And like, as human beings, we might sometimes have to go to things that we don't want to. And that doesn't cause me anxiety for any reason anymore. Like every social, and like I still have some social anxiety, but it's nothing to do with the way I look or the food that's going to be there or is not going to be there. And the fact that it's interrupting my routine or anything like that. Like, but yeah, just little things like this, like it just slowly started to become more and more apparent. And I don't know, like and then I would slowly just think to myself, I think I'm recovered, but I'm not going to say anything to anyone because I don't know. So for like, I reckon months, I didn't even say anything to my partner. Like I was just, for months, I was like pretty certain I'm recovered, but I'm not going to say anything because no one's going to believe me. Like I can't be recovered. Like I can't be. Like it's been 10 years.
Do you know why that doesn't surprise me? Because I think you're a client where almost every session it was, I don't believe that I'm going to be fully recovered.
Yeah.
And questioning, is it actually possible for me? Do you think it's possible for me? And unpacking that, and the fear of what is life going to look like then? And I don't know if I even know who I'm going to be, and all of those fears about what that even could mean and whether it was even possible for you. So I understand that, reluctance to own it, because you don't want to, more than anyone, you don't want to disappoint yourself.
Yeah, that's right. And like as well, like I was not someone who could function well with an eating disorder. I didn't work. I didn't really, like, I pushed all my friends away. I had no social life. I didn't have space for anything other than my eating disorder. And that wasn't just some of the time, like it was constant. So like it was really hard for me to believe that after 10 years, that wasn't going to be the case. And then like, I think, as well, like during my recovery, there was like a time where I hit this really big standstill. I think it was when we took a break, because And like in my mind, I think I said this in my email to you, I accepted that if this was good enough, I'm good with that. I was like, if I don't hit full recovery and this is as good as it gets, I'm like, you know, I've got some space for like a few other things, and like I'm eating a bit more now, and like I'm exercising less now, and like this, that.
Not
And
using behaviors. That's
yeah,
yeah, like
yeah, correct. And
better.
I was like, yeah, it's better. Like I can live like this. Like this is fine. But it was actually when we hit, I mean, I'm very lucky. I live in Perth, so we haven't had it too bad in terms of COVID. But we did have a point where I think we were in like 6 weeks lockdown, maybe. And it was during that time where I realized, no, this isn't good enough, because that was, again, like very grateful that I live in WA during this time, but that was not easy for me. I struggled more than I thought that I was going to. And that's when I was like, no, like you like, you're not going to just stay like this. You're going to keep on going. And I did.
Yeah.
And
So how is recovered life?
I'm so happy. And like, I know that sounds so cheesy, and that doesn't mean that every day's 10 out of 10, but like never in my, I don't know how old I am.
I do that too. I tell people I'm 27. I'm 33.
I'm 26.
Yeah.
I'm turning 27, yes. In my 26 and a half years of life, I cannot remember a time that I was this happy. And recovered life, oh my goodness. Mia, I'm pregnant.
I know. We talked about that a lot.
I don't think I could have done this. Not necessarily like, I don't know, maybe I could have fallen pregnant if I was unwell. I don't know. But I couldn't have done this personally if I wasn't recovered. I couldn't have. Like, I look at my, and like I've had a very less than glamorous pregnancy so far. And that in itself like has made me realize like how much I couldn't have done this if I wasn't recovered, because everything that I'm doing is everything that my eating disorder hated. I stay in bed. Sometimes I stay in bed all day because I'm so sick, and I eat at the moment what can stay down, and a lot of that would not have been improved by my eating disorder in the past. And yeah, and I'm just, my relationships with everyone have improved, and in particular like with my partner. And that's one thing I've always been really grateful for, is my relationship with Harry. And I mean, I don't want to give him too big of a head, but like, he is a phenomenal person, and I'm incredibly lucky. And I used to always think, even when I was unwell, I used to always think that our relationship was the best thing, because it was like, he was my best friend during that time anyway. But it wasn't till being recovered that I realized, no, like our relationship is the best, better than I ever could have imagined now. And like, I wouldn't have had that if I never recovered. And my relationship with my family and my friends, and just everything, like everything. Life, I feel so free. My relationship with food, like, is just, I genuinely, like, I'm still even now talking about it, like, it feels so surreal, because when I was deep in my eating disorder, like, you don't think it's possible to live like this, but now I consider myself to have a better relationship with food than most of the people in the world. Like,
absolutely.
Because eating disorder or not, we live in a very disordered world, which unfortunately does make recovery that bit harder when you're surrounded by people who think that this is the norm. So now, like, while I was in recovery, I remember I used to hear like chit chat from people about like diets and body image and all these different things, and it used to make me really anxious, and I used to get really upset about it.
Quite angry too. We had a lot
Oh
of
my God.
about it.
I would get so angry, especially when it was coming from people who were close to me and I thought had some sort of understanding about my illness. I used to get furious, whereas now I hear this talk and I just feel sad for them. And like, I'm also like, you know, with certain people, I'm like, I tried to educate them, but it's not my job to change every single person in the world's mind. So when I hear them talking, I just feel sad and I feel happy for myself because I don't have to contribute to that and I don't have to be part of that world anymore. Like I don't feel any pressure to take part in that. And like, that's like how good is that?
Yeah, I think that's a big switch, a big indicator that we're fully recovered when we go from, oh, everyone else can diet or everyone else can do this or everyone else can do that and I can't. And it switches to, thank God I don't have to do that anymore.
Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah.
It's so nice. And like even my partner, it's funny because I think that he's probably better than a lot of the older professionals who haven't really evolved with the information regarding eating disorders. And even when we're watching shows or like we'll hear relatives talking or friends talking, he'll just like hit me under the table and like give me this look and we'll look at each other and we'll be like, yeah, like sucks for them. Like we're going to eat the burger and chips. Like it's just so nice.
So what would you go back and tell Monica, who's about to start coaching with all that you've learned and where you are now? What do you think she would want to know about, you know, she doesn't know if it's possible. She spends a lot of the time thinking it's not possible.
I think that when I started coaching with you, I definitely would have told myself that everything has purpose and everything that I'm doing is with the intent to lead me to somewhere. None of it is, at the end of the day, you and whoever it may be that you're working with, they're not just giving you these tasks for the fun of it. They're giving you these tasks to do because they know that recovery is possible and they're evidence of that. And I think that I would trust in that process more because I think as well, like I was a massive, you were like, to me, you were always the Beyonce of recovery. Like I was a fangirl before I actually met you.
That is the most gorgeous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Oh my God. I was such a fangirl. And I think the idea of that in itself was like a big motivator for me because as soon as I knew that it was an opportunity to work with you, I was like, why the hell would I not take this opportunity? But I don't know that going into it, I seen past that more than I should have. Like I definitely would have trusted in you more than I did at the time.
Because that's the eating disorder self part of you isn't going to trust me. And it's certainly not going to like me. It doesn't want to talk to me every week. Your healthy self does. Your healthy self is the one who reached out. Your healthy self is the one who shows up to session. But eating disorder self shows up too. That's something you can't do as a coach is you can't get into the back and forth with the eating disorder because it's not my job to be combative with your eating disorder. It's my job to team up with your healthy self and figure out what's going on with the eating disorder self. Why is it here? What function does it think it's performing? And then we got to help your healthy self figure out how to step into that role. So whenever eating disorder self is showing up and pushing against or being like, what's the point of this? Or this isn't working. It's like, great, let's talk about it. It's part of this process too. Like, what does it think's going on? Because it will do everything to sabotage recovery.
Oh, definitely. And I remember there were some days where I would come into a coaching call with you and straight away you would be like, Monica's not here. Like this, I'm here with your eating disorder, but you would be so keen to just chat it out with me.
Yeah.
And like, I take my hat off to coaches for that because we all know that eating disorders can be bloody stubborn, but like, I think that's also where a lot of the best work is done, right? Because you're able to be the logic when I can't see any. And that's really hard to do when you're by yourself. Like, whereas when you're working with someone, regardless of whether or not your healthy voice is showing up, you've got someone else to show up for you.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that in coaching, you've got to be prepared if you want to be a coach. And also if you're going to work with a coach, you're going to have uncomfortable conversations.
Oh, definitely.
Right. I remember
you can be mad.
Pardon?
You know, like as well, like I remember I would get mad at you.
Yes, you did.
I would leave and I would be like, Mon, like, no, we like me. But I would get so mad at you sometimes.
Yeah, especially with the scale. And we had some really direct conversations about it. And then we got you off the scale. And what happened with your progress within like 2 weeks?
It increased dramatically. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was an uncomfortable conversation. That was a difficult conversation because eating disorder self was going, this is one of my last things that I can hold on to. She can't take this away from us. And healthy self then just has to have blind faith that what I'm saying is actually going to work. So healthy self doesn't have any evidence, and eating disorder self believes it's got all this evidence to say the world's going to fall apart if she takes the scales away from us.
Correct. And like, I think as well, working with you, like, even if I ever considered, or my eating disorder ever considered lying to you about something because I just wanted you to stop nagging me to get off the scales or anything like that, the more that you work with someone, even if I ever went into a call intending to lie about something, I never could. It would always come out because regardless, I think that, oh my goodness, I used to think that I was so good at fooling you. But like, no, I was not. Like, you could see through everything. And it was terrifying at the time, but it was also very productive.
Yeah, because like we speak the same language, right? It's, you know, I can hear what it's saying because it used to say it to me. And I would say the same things to cover up what I was thinking or doing. So like you touched on before, it's not just the coaching experience. Very often, if you choose to work with someone with lived experience, you're really just not leaving. That's why I think it helps to make full recovery possible, because the coach will work through every last bit of the eating disorder. We don't leave any fragments because it'll cling on to the last 0.01%, right? And if you know yourself that these things have, you know, these big obvious red flags like behaviors and certain thoughts, but then there's this little bitty stuff that hangs around at the end, and we've got to clear through all of it. But if you haven't been there, I think that's hard to understand. You think you tick off these big things and that's it, but there's quite a bit of little stuff that gets left behind.
Yeah, definitely. I think I like what you said just then about speaking the same language, right? Because it's true, like it would be like if you were learning a different language and you were to go to someone who it wasn't their first language to learn it off, versus going to someone who spoke that language fluently. Like, who are you going to gain the most from? Like, obviously the person who speaks that. Beautifully
put. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Monica. So many people are going to get so much out of this. I'm so proud of you. You are actually one of my, I think we started working together in my first year of my business.
Yeah, I think a few months after you maybe kicked off.
You're one of my OGs. So it's always so gratifying to hear that people are not just, you know, they haven't just survived this awful illness, but they've thrived and actually got even more out of recovery than they probably thought was possible, right? That there's these skills and these attitudes and these opportunities that recovery makes available that you don't realize are there until you get to the very end point. And I'm just so excited that you're bringing a new little person into the world, because that was definitely, every time I got you to do that activity, day in my life when I'm recovered, that was always the consistent feature, was being a mum. And I know you're going to be a wonderful mum, and I know that your recovery is going to play a huge part in that. And I have no doubt that little person is going to benefit enormously from that. So thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Mia. I'm honoured.
Keep in touch. Let me know how it's going.
I will.